Booker T. Washington was a leading African American leader and intellectual of the late 19th and early 20th century. He founded an educational establishment in Alabama and promoted a philosophy of economic self-reliance and self-improvement for the black population. Born a slave, Washington grew up in a deeply racist and segregated society. Due to the deeply entrenched hostility, he felt it was necessary to accept segregated laws and concentrate on economic and cultural self-improvement. However, his conservative stance on race relations became increasingly criticized by a new generation of civil rights leaders who wished to be more assertive in challenging segregation and the Jim Crow laws. Washington is widely acknowledged for playing a significant role in promoting education for African Americans and slowly raising the hopes and aspirations of an oppressed people. Early life. Washington was born into slavery in 1856 in Virginia. In the early days, he experienced real hardship growing up on the slave plantation. His mother named him Taliaferro, but this soon fell out of use, and he was known just as Booker. In 1865, Washington was 9 years old when the American Civil War ended. He remembered vividly the day of emancipation when he learned that all the slaves would be freed and they could go as they pleased. After emancipation, his mother took him to West Virginia where he worked in a salt furnace and later as a servant for a white family. This was a formative experience as he learned self-discipline and practical skills. He also began to teach himself the basics of reading and writing. Later he had the opportunity of being educated at one of the first schools for freed slaves, the Hampton Institute. Washington excelled at his studies, and on the 4th of July 1881, he helped to found the new Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Tuskegee was a private university, technical college dedicated to offering educational opportunities for African Americans. Up from slavery. In the late 19th century, although freed from slavery, African Americans experienced severe discrimination through the notorious Jim Crow laws which legalized segregation along racial lines. With blacks effectively disenfranchised, opportunities were limited and there was a real threat of violence and lynching without recourse to justice. Against this backdrop, Washington rose to national prominence with his Atlanta Address of 1895. The Atlanta Address effectively accepted segregation and white political rule but asked for basic education and due process in law. Washington eschewed the civil rights demand for equality and education but sought to encourage charitable funds to support black education. This pragmatic approach drew support from Northern liberals and many from within the black community. Washington was affiliated to the Republican Party and served as an advisor to Presidents Theodore Roosevelt and William Taft. Washington's piecemeal approach helped widen educational opportunities for the black population, but the pace of social and political change frustrated younger civil rights leaders who saw Southern white politicians unwilling to make any real concessions but tolerated lynching and other inequities. In the early 1900s, Washington was challenged by Du Bois. Du Bois felt Washington was too accommodating to the status quo, and instead, he advocated campaigns for political representation and the opposition to separation along racial lines. Washington was concerned that as a minority population without proper legal support, confrontation would be fruitless and only lead to greater suffering. In 1905, the Niagara Movement issued a statement breaking with Washington's perceived accommodation and pursued a more radical action to end injustice. This led to the formation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. However, away from the public glare, he did offer support to legal challenges against segregation and supporting political enfranchisement for blacks. Washington was in a difficult position of seeking to retain support from establishment figures who liked his moderation, while also sympathizing with more radical challenges to injustice. Washington was a national figure and the leading figurehead of the African American community. He developed friendships with white philanthropists and was successful in raising money to support schools and educational initiatives. Washington increasingly focused on training teachers who would be able to in turn teach in their rural communities. With financial support from Julius Rosenwald, he helped support and found more than 5,000 schools in the South. Washington also founded the National Negro Business League, a national network to support black businessmen. He received an honorary Master of Arts degree from Harvard University in 1896 and an honorary doctorate from Dartmouth College in 1901. In 1901, he published his second autobiography, Up from Slavery. It emphasizes how Washington rose from slavery to be a self-made man through his own hard work and diligence, and also with the support of sympathetic teachers and philanthropists. The book became a bestseller, touching on the ideals of the American dream, the idea everyone has the opportunity to rise in society, despite the most difficult barriers. Washington's high profile and support of wealthy white philanthropists gave him substantial power and influence within the African American community. Washington married Fanny Smith in 1882, but she passed away in 1884 shortly after giving birth to Portia. 2 years later he married Olivia A. Davidson, and the couple had another 2 children, but again tragedy struck when she died in 1889. His third wife Margaret James Murray helped bring up his 3 children and outlived Washington. Washington traveled widely throughout the U.S. and frequently gave well-received talks. He worked very hard, and this contributed to high blood pressure and stress. In 1915, he fell ill and was diagnosed with Bight's disease. The doctors gave him only a few days to live, and he chose to return to Tuskegee, where he passed away at the age of 59. One man cannot hold another man down in the ditch without remaining down in the ditch with him. I shall allow no man to belittle my soul by making me hate him. Associate yourself with people of good quality, for it is better to be alone than in bad company. Few things can help an individual more than to place responsibility on him, and to let him know that you trust him. Success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome. There is no power on earth that can neutralize the influence of a high, simple and useful life. You can't hold a man down without staying down with him. Character, not circumstances, makes the man. There are 2 ways of exerting one's strength, one is pushing down, the other is pulling up. I have learned that success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has had to overcome while trying to succeed. To hold a man down, you have to stay down with him. If you can't read, it's going to be hard to realize dreams. We must reinforce argument with results. No man, who continues to add something to the material, intellectual and moral well-being of the place in which he lives, is left long without proper reward. The individual who can do something that the world wants done will, in the end, make his way regardless of his race.